Welcome to Heightened Life, a place for conversation that sparks insight and inspires growth. Hey, welcome to episode 6 of Heightened Life. I'm Amanda Goins. This week, I had the opportunity to chat with Nate G. Nate is the host of the Extraordinary podcast, as well as the creator of the innovative personal growth program, 8 Keys to Great. He shares a bit about the podcast, then we dive into the 8 Keys to Great program. The program focuses on redesigning lives using similar methodology as used in designing and building a home. It was a fun and insightful conversation, and I'm so excited to share it with you. Hey, Nate, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Take a moment and tell everyone a bit about yourself and what you do.
My name's Nate G. I'm the host of the Extraordinary podcast. I'm a carpenter by design. This is a new little soiree for me. But to go along with the to go along with the Extraordinary podcast, I also created a personal development program called the 8 Keys to Great, which are based on the same principles of how you would remodel your home and applying those principles to how you'd remodel your life to create a lifestyle by design.
Awesome. So to get started, tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Well, our tagline is we profile ordinary people living extraordinary lives. And so what my goal with the show is to demonstrate attributes of the 8 Keys to Great that I put together that other people are currently doing and are benefiting from. Basically, what I wanted to do was to verify the concepts that I put together. And when I look for people that they may seem like they're just an ordinary Joe, just kind of doing their thing. But when you dig into their lifestyle, into what they're doing, you see that they really are living an extraordinary life. And every one of these principles is validated through an interview or through a guest that I have on the show.
Awesome. Yeah. And you have some great guests on your show. I know of one of them personally.
Yeah, one of those extraordinary people is you, and I just wrapped up your edit from our podcast interview last night, so hopefully you got that this morning.
I
Waiting for you.
did. I haven't got a chance to listen yet because I've been busy fluttering around the house, but I definitely will check that out. And I'm very excited. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I'm really
So,
excited to get your episode out there. So it was a great conversation, and after going back and listening, I'm really excited to share some of those stories that you put out there.
oh, thank you. So tell everybody a bit about 8 Keys to Great and just go.
Well, I mean, I could spend the entire podcast breaking down each one of the elements and the principles behind it. And I also, before we even talk about the 8 keys, it's a concept that's been in process for a while, and it's a program that I'm constantly trying to hone and craft and refine to get to its absolute best, to get the best quality product that I can out there. And thank you to you for being one of the people that are willing to help me with that and go through some of the testing of this program. And I'm really excited for our conversation after this, where we're going to really dive into your experience with the program and if you're seeing any benefit from it or not. Because like I said, it's worked for me, and I can see that it's some of the principles certainly apply to a lot of the people that I'm interviewing. But it's still, there's still a lot of questions I have as to seeing how it applies to, all walks of life, because just because it worked for me and a few others doesn't necessarily mean it'll apply to everyone. But basically what it is like I said, it's remodeling your lifestyle the same way that you would remodel your home. So the first thing you do is you have to figure out what your dream home looks like. And so that's a big first step. Is we all think we know what we want. We all have this idea of retirement at 65, and we're going to go travel the world, and this kind of carte blanche dream design, if you will. And I've when I challenge people about that dream and about that concept, I found pretty quickly that a lot of people just had that as their default go-to. But very few people actually took the time to really figure out what it is that they wanted specifically. What do you want to have 10 years from now? And it's a selfish thing at first. It's really, like, what are the material possessions that I want to own? What is the house that I want to have? What does that look like? Is it a house on the beach? Is it a house in the mountains? What's the kind of car that I want to drive? Is it a, jacked up pickup truck like us rednecks, or is it a Lamborghini, or, Ferrari, or some kind of fancy sports car, or whatever? There's all these different things that we want to have in our life. So the first step is identifying and actually writing down those things, and really figuring out, okay, and I say things, but it's also like, what do I want to do with my life? Do I want to travel? Do I want to do with my leisure time? Am I a big family guy, or do I want to be out there hustling girls all the time? Do I want to be rich and famous, or do I want to be doing a lot of good for, behind the scenes? So that's the first step, is figuring all that out. And then from that, then, just like once you have the design of your house, of what you want, once you have the idea, the vision, well, you have to put it on paper. You have to create a set of blueprints. Well, that's the same thing with our own lifestyle. We need to create a set of blueprints that lays out a plan to go get those things. So that's key number two, creating the blueprint. Then from there, that's really where the action begins to take place. Then you've got the initial construction, where you're doing your rough framing. You're really kind of laying down the fundamentals. You're starting ugly. You're getting down to the basics. You're just getting going. And you're going to make a lot of mistakes along the way, but that's okay, because it's still the rough framing. Nothing has to be perfect. Nothing is expected to be perfect. You don't have time for it to be perfect. But then once you've done that for a while, then you get to the initial inspections. And when you're building a new home, before you can put the drywall and close everything up, you have to have an inspector come in and look to make sure everything's right. Well, this is a time to self-reflect. That's where you get your mentors involved. That's where you create feedback loops to find out, okay, well, I've started and now I'm going, but now I've got to get better. I've got to continue to refine and see, course correct. Am I getting
Mhm.
astray? Am I going off on the wrong direction, or do I need to realign and adjust along the way? And you're always going to be doing that. You're always going to be course correcting and adjusting and honing your message, kind of like I'm honing the 8 keys to great. And then so
Awesome.
and then
Oh,
so from there, you've got again, like I said, this
oh
process.
no, you're fine. I'm like, I'm listening, especially since I'm, taking part in this. I'm learning as I go from you right now. So continue.
So and I'll keep it as short and succinct as I can. So from the initial inspections, then you have your finish work, where you're doing all the fine details, and that's where you're in construction. That's where you're putting up the crown molding. You're putting in all the fine little neat touches, all the little attention to detail kind of things. And so when you're doing that with your lifestyle, that's where you're creating processes, and that's where you're really getting good at what you do. You're becoming known for whatever it is that you're getting really good at.
Mhm.
And then from there, then you've got a final inspection, where you begin to share that final product, your final vision, with the world. And that's when people start to ask you, okay, well, hey, this is what I want. I want this same beautiful house. I want this same kind of lifestyle. How do I get that? And that then provides the last step, which is leaving a legacy, where you then mentor and teach others how to create their own process and leave a legacy. Just like when one of the things I loved about doing construction is, when you're done, you had something to show for what
Mhm.
you've done at the end of the day. You have a final product, if you will. Well, that's the kind of the same concept with this. You want to have a lifestyle to show off at the end of it all, so that people will then hopefully have a desire to then take those own steps for themselves.
Awesome. And I love it. And it's just like when you get a new home, I just recently over the summer moved. So a lot of this makes sense on so many levels to me. But when you get a new home or build a new home or whatever, it's one of those things, you have to maintain it even after you put all these processes into place. It's a constant reinspection, and that's one thing I love about the fact that you found that this worked for you and has worked for other people, but you're constantly gauging how well it works on a broad spectrum for people, and I think that's really great. So.
Yeah, and the other aspect of it is, I like to think of it as an ongoing process. A lot
Mhm.
of the self-help tools and a lot of the principles that we talk about in this industry, they're kind of not a one-stop shop or a quick fix, but they're, you want to get everything in bite-sized chunks. But with the Eight Keys to Great program, it's really not designed to be figured out in a day. It's not designed to be laid out in a week. It's really a process that takes some time. And then even once you've laid out the process, I think that you continue to stay with the process, and it allows you to continue to grow and evolve down the line. It's not just even like a 90-day thing. I think some of the keys will apply 10 years down the road. I
Oh,
hope anyway.
absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things as you, I think, progress into further keys, you might go back and re-examine some of the things that you put down in the first key that you want and realize that's not really what I want. And I think a lot of people base what they think they want and their vision on society, like what they think everybody else expects them to want out of life. And that's something through this process and just in general recently I've realized, we design our own lives and we have to figure out what we want, not what society we think society expects us to want. And that's been a big thing for me. So,
Yeah. And I mean, and as far as society goes, I mean, there's a lot of basic things that we all kind of want. Like we all kind of, have that, we want that financial success. We all need money to pay our bills. So there's a certain amount of, financial aspect to all of
mhm,
this that we all need to get to. But what I've found, and that's a very appealing thing for a lot of people, especially when you don't have money, when when you have needs that aren't being met. Money's a really strong pull and a big factor. But what I've found is once you dive into these principles and once you really start to achieve some results, and once you begin to be able to hold off the bill collectors, once you be able to have a little bit of comfort, that money and that financial success has less and less significance as you go.
yeah.
And there's other things that end up taking the place of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because as I was listening, I was reflecting of how I did the first step. And you mentioned listing all the things you want. And I was like, oh, I didn't do it like that. Like I just listed like ideals, like I want to be creative and blah, blah, blah. So, but then you transitioned and said it was both. So I guess I did it correctly, but we'll figure that out. So
Yeah.
I'm
Well, and at this point, there are no right or wrong answers. That's again why I wanted you guys to beta test, was
mhm.
to see, like how does it come across? Because again, I'm so deep into these eight keys now. It's like it all just seems like a foregone conclusion. Everything like is already kind of assumed, but I have to remember that everybody else that I'm exposing to these keys, they've never seen them before. So
Mhm.
it's given me a lot of reflection for sure.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it because it's helped bring clarity to what I want. Because I've always had, well, not always, but in the past couple years since I've really been focusing on improving my life and becoming the best version of myself, I've had a vision of what I want. But I think a lot of times it was too broad, and I tried to focus on everything all at once, and that makes you kind of spin your tires because you don't have enough clarity or enough priority. I think for me, I've had to prioritize. Okay, I'm going to go for these things first, and then I'll try to do these things. I think it was you and I talking about in the podcast I did with you about life being a series of sprints, and in a big marathon, and that's kind of what I've really tried to put into practice recently. Focus really, really intently on a few things and then get those going before I shift focus into something else because I had a tendency to focus full throttle on like 15 things and then you don't make any progress in any of them.
Yeah.
And I think that this process really brings clarity and streamlines your intent and your focus. So I'm really enjoying it so far.
Yeah. Well, and there are two aspects of the first key that I found interesting as I've begun to get some feedback from people doing the beta testing. Number one, that first coming up with those 40 things that you want. That it seems, well, number one, it seems hard at first because you think, well, there's not 40 things that I really want, or I've only got these 5 or 10 things. But then like it's interesting how that progresses, because the next part of that first step is to then assign a value to that item, how long you think it'll take, either 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, or 10 years to get
Mhm.
that particular thing. And I think once you begin to, what I've seen with a lot of people is they'll get like 5 or 10 or 15 things on the list, and then they'll go on to that next step where they're assigning value. And then as they've had time to reflect on it, as they've saturated with this first key for like that first week, then they come back to that list and they're able to then add to that. And then it ends up growing, and eventually it gets to the point where you can actually get to more like 50 things. And I think that the whole process behind doing that is just to get the mind thinking and to get your brain really to spend some, because we, like I said, we all just assume that we know all these things. There's a guy, Dan Gilbert, that's got an amazing book called Stumbling on Happiness, and he
I
really
have that
died.
book.
It's a
Yeah.
great read. I mean, it's a little slow at first, but he really dives into like, once we spend time with this and trying to really identify the things that we think make us happy, number one, we realize we don't know really what makes us happy. And then number two, what's really fascinating is the things that we thought were going to make us that are going to make us happy. Once we really flesh that out and take ourselves down that path, we find out that that's not the answer. That what we thought
Absolutely.
was there was not. It's not. It's Yeah. It's pretty interesting.
And I think a lot of that for me and my experience has been with the material type things, or looking for happiness outside of myself. Like thinking once I accomplish this in the eyes of other people and get validated, then I'll be happy. And then I realized that that's fleeting. And I think that, and funny enough, I was just thinking, making the list of the 40 things I made, like I got to 25 or 30 and I hadn't even put any like items. I just put ideals. So it'll be much easier now that I realize I can put things on my list too.
Yeah, but I love the fact that you went that route with it, because you're not the only one that's done that. That's kind of gone with more like concepts as opposed to material items. And I think that that's an indication that I mean, it's a good indication that you're not super tied up in a lot of material stuff. I think that just shows a level of maturity. When I designed this, I was thinking more millennials that, that are kind of have their mindset on those, the fancy car and the things like that.
Well, I think part of it for me too is where I just moved and I moved all of our belongings. I think I'm at the point now where I'm like, I don't need more stuff. Like
Yeah,
I
you're
need to
in
like
declutter mode.
thin out some of the stuff that I have currently maybe, and then I'll re-examine what I want from there. But
Well, that's a perfect segue into that demo step, that
mhm.
that demolition that we talk about, which is the third key. Is really, it's cleaning out some of those bad habits and really identifying what are the behaviors or the things that are getting us in our way to keeping us from achieving the results that we want. And like a good friend of mine, Carolyn Owens, who also has a podcast, we were talking about that, and she's also helping me through some of these 8 keys. But before we got into that, one of the things that she was really had a there was a big focus for her was writing. But
Mhm.
what had happened was, over time, she had created an environment within her home with the clutter and the books and everything else that wasn't conducive for her writing anymore. And through a series of conversations and some few steps that we did, she actually went through a process of, like you're talking about, decluttering and providing an environment that allowed her to then do the things that she really wanted to do. And that's one of the first steps in a lifestyle design.
Absolutely, yeah. Habit examination and elimination and formation has been really important for me over the past couple of years. And absolutely, like, making your environment conducive to your goals is super important too. Um, I read in 2019, Atomic Habits was a big one for me. And that really
The
just,
James Clear, right?
yeah. And that just really got me thinking, like I would list all my, because I always thought, oh, this habit isn't really impacting my life that much, that this bad habit. And then looking at it and taking it down the rabbit hole of how is this really impacting me, not just today, but in the long run, um, really shook me up and got me to change a lot of the habits I had at that time. So
Yeah. Well, the biggest takeaway that I got from that book, and it's a big takeaway that I've realized in my own life. It
mhm.
took me a long time to figure out. And as a teenager and as a younger person, I never spent a lot of time with the details. I was always kind of that big picture guy. And where I'm at now, one of my most favorite sayings is the little things matter. The biggest thing that I see people struggling with is doing those little habits, those little things that they all add up. I've got a video buddy that does some amazing work, and he's got huge potential, but he's falling short of some of that potential because he's not doing a lot of the little things. He's missing a lot of opportunities because he's not taking advantage and creating these micro habits. And I think when you create those little bitty routines, those little daily habits, and you can add them, because number one, they're easy to start, and then they're easy to maintain, and then over time they become habits. And then if you can add enough of those things to your toolkit or to your daily routine, um, they reap benefits. That's where the big payoffs come from.
Yeah, that one hit me personally because I have a tendency to be a big picture person too. Well, and it's odd for me. Some things I'm very focused on the details, but then I kind of gloss over the details in other areas of my life. So I think that that's something that I can definitely learn from and apply in my
Yeah,
own life.
can't we all, right? We all
Yeah.
have work to do on that one for sure.
So, yeah. So at what point did you decide that this was your path, that you wanted to pursue this? Have you always been in this trajectory or is this new?
Not at all. No, like I said, I am way more comfortable swinging a hammer than I am behind a microphone. You can hear from we both have that lovely Southern accent that
Yes.
that comes through. I'm not a public speaker. I was never get blessed with a good voice. I've got three sisters that can sing like angels. I'm tone deaf, so this is not my wheelhouse. But at the end of 2018, well, at the beginning of 2018, there was a really interesting set of circumstances that came together. I had run my own business. I've commercial contractor for years. I'd started doing um, facilities maintenance work. I was in that line of work for just under a decade. And
Oh,
at the
wow.
beginning of 2018, they told us, the company that I was working for said, "Hey, look, we're considering shutting down our facilities division. We're going to sub it out to a subcontractor. And, this is a nationwide company. We've got employees from California to Maine, and we're going to do it in sections, one section of the country at a time. And we're going to see how it goes. And but so fair warning, get your resume polished up, start looking around. And
Mm,
they even said, hey, the subcontractor that's coming in, they're going to need a lot of help. You guys can interview with them as well. We want to, they did an amazing job of not only keeping us informed, but really taking great care of us as they began to shut the company down, or shut that division of the company down. And so
mm.
over the course of 2018, that's exactly what they did. And so it gave us this golden opportunity. And I had been bored with that job for a while. I was super excited about some new possibilities. I had actually started putting my resume out there, and like midway through 2018, got some great feedback, had all these great relationships already established. And my mindset at the time was, man, this is going to work out great. I'm going to get this great new job with a couple months to spare. I'm going to get a nice little severance package. It'll just go straight into the savings account, stock that away. I'll even pull double salary for a couple of months, because the role that they had us in the old job was winding down. We were just basically sitting there to help the subcontractor get on board, and it was super easy. So things were going exactly according to plan. I mean, just couldn't be better. There were two companies in particular that I was interviewing with, follow-up interviews, meeting the staff, everything's just coming together. It got to the point where I was really stressing which one I was going to tell no, because
Mm.
at some point I got to make a decision and make a call. And at this point I'm getting in deep with these companies, and I didn't want to, I wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing. And at the same time, interestingly enough, I'm going through a lot of personal problems at home.
Mm.
Going through this potentially divorce, and problems with my wife and all these different things. And so when it all comes down, it all settles out. Both companies that I had been talking to, neither one of them made an offer to me.
Oh, wow.
It was really strange. There was just something, and I get it. Sometimes you're just not a right fit. There's other people that are interviewing, whatever. But this was different. There just something just wasn't right. It just nothing felt right about the way that it all kind of came to be. And at the same time, I'm going through these problems with my wife, and when it all kind of comes crashing down, I just get down on my knees and say, look, God, I had a plan. I thought everything was going exactly what it was supposed to be going. I'm just chugging right along, and now my train has gone off the tracks.
Yeah.
Everything is completely backwards. I don't know what else to do. I don't know which way to turn. I don't, so at this stage in the game, I'm not a big believer in, hey, like God gives you this vision or tells you what to do, or whatever. But I was like, hey, look, you got to give me something.
I need a lifeline. Yeah.
Yeah, I need some. Just give me like I'll do whatever. I'll put in the work. But I need some kind of guidance or direction to say, okay, this is the way to go. Because
Yeah.
I thought the way that was very well laid out. I mean, I did all the legwork, I did all the homework, I did everything thought I was supposed to be doing, and the door got slammed in my face. So what is that solution supposed to be? And over the course of the next 90 days, all this began to come at me, and it was like I was doing all these morning routine things. I was getting into the journaling like crazy. I'm reading like a banshee. I'm just absorbing, because as I was doing all this job prep, I was doing all these little personal development things to just be the best employee that I could be, the best hire out there.
Mhm.
I mean, I was learning all these what do you call it? Charisma on Demand is this YouTube
Yeah.
channel. This guy Charlie's got some great techniques about like how to build rapport and all these different things. And yeah, so when it all came crashing down, this is what emerged out of it. This podcast, this 8 Keys to Great concept, which was not called 8 Keys to Great at the time. It looked completely different. But and so I just started following that path. And as I started following that path, um, I began to have all these little epiphanies along the way, all these little moments of just crazy clarity, crazy opportunity, things just dumped in my lap, things that should never have happened happening. And so I just blindly, with faith, started following this path. And honestly, that's where I'm at now. Like every time I try to go back to my old go back to what I know, what I'm good at, I
Mhm.
get yanked back into this path. And so at this point, I've quit questioning it. I've embraced it, and it hasn't been financially lucrative by any stretch of the imagination, but it's been incredibly rewarding. And now I'm beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel. I'm beginning to see some possibilities of how this is all going to work. And it's not there yet, and I still got a tremendously long way to go, but I'm really excited about the direction I'm headed.
Awesome. Yeah. And it just seems like a lot of times when life completely derails you, that's where you find your true calling. I mean, that's kind of the case with me as well. Um, Unfortunately, we are running low on time. So, but I'd love to have you back sometime and discuss this further, especially we can discuss, my progress as I'm going through these 8 keys as well. I think it's going to be a big game changer for me, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, before we go, do you have anything else you'd like to share and tell everyone where they can find the podcast and the 8 Keys to Great online?
Okay, yeah, sure. Thank you for the opportunity and the platform to share the 8 Keys to Great message. I feel selfish when I spend an entire program just talking about that and not like providing more benefit to your listeners and what you're doing. And but the before I plug my stuff, I just want to say kudos to you and the journey that you're on. And to watch you, not, I mean, forget about the 8 keys, but just to see what you've already done through your weight loss journey and through your personal development journey. Um, I've got a couple of friends now that are in this podcasting game, and we're all kind of going down this personal development path. And it's so fun to watch. And I get so inspired by people like you doing what you're doing, and the message and the calling that you've got, and the progress that you're making. A lot of people on Instagram love the pretty bodies and the ideals that kind of society loves, but those things don't inspire me at all. What
Mhm.
inspires me are the people that are like just going out there and getting it,
Yeah. Getting
every
after
day.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, like the ones that are struggling, the ones that
Mhm.
are overweight, the ones that are, that don't have it easy, the ones that don't look like the golden goddess, or the Adonis
Mhm.
on the hill. Those are the ones that, man, they just get me going. So appreciate the opportunity. But yeah, so 8 Keys are great. Is It's the number 8, the word 8 The podcast is there. We've also got blog posts with additional content there. There's also some cool resources. We've got some resources pages, some things that you can use if you're a podcaster. If you're not, if you're someone that's just trying to learn digital media, all that stuff is there. So check that out. You can find me on social media at the Extraordinary Podcast or at 8 Keys to Great. Both are on Instagram. So
Okay, so it froze up for a second there. It's 8keystogreat.net, correct? Okay.
it's .com or .net, and it's the biggest thing is it's the number 8
Okay.
keys, the number 2
Two.
great, and then .com or .net. Either one will take you to the same place.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been so much fun. I love sitting around and talking to you and just sharing these ideas. And I really enjoyed you sharing the process. I think it will help a lot of people. So
I'm so
thanks.
grateful for the platform. Thank you.
And there you have it. Be sure to check out 8keystogreat.net or .com. Again, that is the number 8 keys, the number 2 great.net or .com. Also, connect with me. Follow along throughout the week on Facebook and Instagram, and keep up with all of the Heightened Life media on heightenedlife.org. Again, that is heightenedlife.org. Until next time, much love, and I will see you later.